So, welcome, welcome. This is week 2 of our book talk, and it's for many of us, I guess it's our favorite agreement. And we were kind of just joking about how we think it comes second on purpose, because if it came first, people might not have gotten through it. People might have said, like, I'm done reading. I might have the first time. It might have scared me. But I did actually, I want to start with like just a thought that came to mind while I was reading this agreement again today. And it really comes down to this aspect of like self-worth and like self-love. Because I feel like at the end of the day, like that is foundation of everything. Because when you think about this stuff, like I'm going to use this agreement because this is one we're diving into today. But like, don't take anything personally. And he even talks about this idea that it's like whenever someone says something to you, the only way that poison is ever going to sink into you is if you believe it, is
Yeah.
if you have made it in agreement with yourself. So when I think about that, like I had to backward, like kind of backtrack, and I asked myself, like, okay, well, how do you avoid that? Because that's hard. Like if somebody says something to you that's hurtful, like how do we have the armor on us to have it deflect? Like how are we able to equip ourselves in a way that's going to help us not take things personally? And at the end of the day, that's us. Like that is 100% you. So it's like, again, I think we talked about it a little bit last week. Like that's where the work is, no matter what. Like in order for us to ever make these agreements, I think that the real work is going to come from like unraveling who we really are and like understanding our self-confidence so that when these words happen or when these opinions are thrown out into the world by people, we know enough about ourselves to like not agree with the things that we know don't align with us, like in our image of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So that was definitely, I think I just wanted to start with that because I think that is where the gold is. I know the first time I read this book, and then I'm gonna open up to you guys and kind of see like what you've taken from it. But I guess it was in college. It was actually the second time I was teaching in Lowell, Mass, inner city school. And I'd been teaching for probably 2 or 3 years. And some of those kids have a really hard life. Like so hard that I would cry myself home to school, like from school some days, because there was just only so much I could do in the classroom for these people, for these kids. And you throw your heart and soul into them. And then you're getting really far with this kid. You're like, wow, he trusts me. Like he's never trusted an adult in his whole life. And like here he is, he's coming, he's working, he's getting an A. And then you would come in the next day and say, like, F you to me. Or he would like completely blow up. I have this specific student in mind, like completely blow up after we had made so much progress. And back then, I took it personally. I did. Like it
Hard not
broke.
to.
Exactly, right? Like it broke me. Like I remember being like, oh, like what could I have done? How could I prevented this? Like why did he do this? Like what's wrong with me? You know?
Yeah.
And I remember reading this book then, and it really helped me get through the year because I started to really think about situations like this in the sense of like, it's not what I did, like what's going on in his life that is causing him to react that way. Because it's not me. If anything, like I hate to say it, but as parents, and if you guys have like close friends that have been through a lot, it's sad, but sometimes it's even the people that we feel closest with. Sometimes it's the people that we trust the most to like not turn around and leave us that actually I think get the heaviest like burden of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that sometimes. Like I think sometimes there's this weird subconscious of like this person unconditionally loves me so I can unload my shit on them because they're never going to leave. And I think that ties into all of this too. Like I think we have to start working our way backwards with certain things, and start asking ourselves, like, first off, there's nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with me. It's not us. It's not about us. It's about them. And figuring out like why is that happening on their end. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna open that up. That's sort of like that's kind of where I started or where I'm at. So
No, I totally agree. And I bring into that if you make it a strong habit to not take it personally, you're going to find that huge zone of freedom. And you're just going to, you'll listen to yourself better and you'll look at yourself better in the mirror and you'll be able to get things done in a more positive way and feel better about how you did it rather than being like, oh my God, well, I did it this way, but I should have done it this way, or I said it this way and I should have said it this way. And then you lay in bed all night, and I know I do this. I will be so tired, and then I could have a conversation with somebody, and just sometimes I look at people too in depth that if they give a specific approach to it with their tone or their facial expression, I'll go home and I'll be like, well, did I say this the wrong way? Was I too annoying? Did I? And I'll just be up all night on how I could have expressed myself better. And then I think to myself, why do I have to do that? I said what I said. I did what I did. I did nothing wrong. I just was having a conversation. And I can't take how someone else's facial expressions may be. So that is a huge thing as well. Just like, give yourself credit when you do things, and like, just don't take anything personal.
I 110% agree with that. I myself, slight background, my fiance left me, he called it off, took the ring back, whole mini blowout with his mom. And, I started to think like, why, should I have said it that way? Did I need to say it that way? And then I'm like, I've reached a breaking point and nobody would say anything. And I was like, I'm saying something. I don't care. It needs to be said. It needs to be out there that, listen, this is affecting more than just you and you, because I'm supposed to be marrying him. It's affecting me in a negative way.
Mhm.
And I started thinking, like, did I need to say it that way? And then probably the next day or that Tuesday, Chantal actually texted me out of nowhere and was like, "Hey, how are things?" And I'm like, you don't even want to know, but you do. And it was, I didn't do anything wrong. I said how I felt. I meant it. Did it necessarily need to come out with a little bit of viciousness that it did? Debatable, but it needed to be said. And after I said it, like, obviously things didn't go well, but that's a whole different issue in itself. I like felt relief because I finally said it to the person that was carrying it along. And I was like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, and it's like what you just said, like, I said what I said. I'm not apologizing for it, so I meant it.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And
sharing that.
kudos to you for saying that, because, it's something that, yes, it's a terrible situation, and you never want to go through anything or experience that, but you also have now granted yourself the freedom to remove yourself from that toxic environment. And just think, if it was a follow through, for how long would you have tolerated it? How long more would it have gone on? And when you're married, you don't want to be unhappy. That's the
No,
whole
and
point
like
of it,
our
If
wedding
so,
wasn't going to be for like 2 more years, and like I've already butted heads with people, and just like it wouldn't have changed. Even if I kept it to myself, it would have got worse and worse and worse, and a bigger blow up would have happened.
Yep.
It happened now. It sucks, obviously, but I don't have to deal with the toxicness of those two people
Mhm.
anymore.
Yep.
And that alone is like,
You. Yeah. And she's doing a heck of a lot of some like self-digging stuff. I love it. Everything you're doing right now is beautiful, Justina. And I was just thinking too, it's like, so backtrack a little bit to like agreement one, being impeccable with our words. You guys just reminded me of that, because if my pen, I'm such a teacher, if you are impeccable with your words, then what's coming out of your mouth is your authentic thoughts and your authentic opinions, and therefore you really shouldn't have to worry about the things that you've said. Like, it actually is kind of building on each other in that way.
Right.
Like, the goal is that when you speak the truth, it really isn't like the way that somebody takes that, you can't hold that on you. Like,
yes,
that's not
you
that's
can't
not
help how
on
they're
you.
gonna take it.
Yeah, right. Like, especially if you shared your truth with the world, like the way that somebody else absorbs it, that's the part you can't take personally, because that's not
Yeah,
up to you.
because that's on them.
Yeah. So
And I do say for the most part, I say what I say.
Mm.
Does get me in trouble sometimes, but all my friends, like I have actually known Chantal for quite some time with high school together. And I still have friends from high school, and they all are aware, like, if you ask me a question, I'm gonna give you an answer. You might not like it, but I'm gonna tell you the truth.
You're in the right room right now. Don't worry.
I felt that. Oh, little guy.
So the biggest thing that jumped out to me this time around reading this chapter, and I forgot to have it in front of me. It's one of those nights. Because I know there was like a quote. I like underlined a few things. Is the point, like everything you all said, yep. And like we don't want to take anything negative that people say personally, but the biggest thing that jumped out at me this time around was even the positive stuff that people say not taking personally, like basically anything that anybody says to us, anything that anybody does to us, positive or negative, don't take personally, because it really has nothing, it's not, has nothing to do with us, right? Like it's like, and so it's just wrapping your brain around that, like why we as people and humans are always looking for some type of like validation or something. So like when someone says, so I've been giving a lot of thought to it, because like when someone says like, you know, oh, that was so great that you just did that, and it's like, thank you, and you're like happy, and then it's like, and not that you don't want to be happy, like I, you know, it's like one of those things, like, okay, like I want to be happy because I like to feel those feelings, but like how deep does it go? Like great, but like that should not affect me, where I now am going to get in my people pleaser mode and start doing all the things that people then validate or tell me is great about me, right? Like I then still stay even keel, like be the same person, be authentically you, without, you know, leaning towards doing the things that people are cheering me on about versus the things that they may be negative about, knowing that balance of like where I am, like what feels right to me, without needing any sort of validation, good, bad, or indifferent, from something external to me. And that's like such a hard, like it's not a hard concept, but it can be. Like we complicate everything, right? I mean, we're human, right? So we like overthink that entire thing, but it is a really interesting concept that has layers. This whole not taking personally, there's just so many layers. Like that's why literally, if you haven't read this book a dozen or more times, right? Like it doesn't matter how many times I read this book, I will like get into that mode. I will get something a little different in that moment of like what I need to hear now. And for me, the biggest thing that jumped out in this chapter was, you know, even when someone's cheering me on, you know, like basically don't change who I am based on the positive feedback I'm getting either, because it really doesn't matter.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that I read that like a few times actually when it got to the part about like the positive things, like don't take those personally, but then it's like, as you said, like we're human. We
Right.
look for that validation from others when in reality it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like we are who we are. So it's like, oh my God, you're so happy I just held the door for you or something. Like we don't need that validation, but we look for it. We
Yeah.
want it. But
And you feel
it doesn't make up our self-worth.
Yes, exactly. So like going back to like what Chantal started with at the beginning, it all comes down to like self-worth and self-love, and it we don't, and to like not be swayed by one way or the other of how someone else feels.
Yeah.
And I think it molds people into not being their true selves, like you had said. So when someone gets that positivity, it's almost like they form into that whole different person. So it depends on who you're around, and you can notice it with people with the personalities. When you walk into a room or you walk into a party and you're with people that you see in all these different scenarios, but you see how they mold to how people talk about them. And it's pretty incredible, because if it's a negative factor, you see that they kind of deter and go a different direction. But if not, that's who they are for the time until it changes again. And it's really funny to watch people do that, because they do take it personally and they get it into their heads, which is, you know, the toxic agreement, and you get that into your mind, and then you become that. So it's not you. And that's obviously what he is saying. It's not you, but it's really not you, because you're just taking into what people are saying. And it's so fascinating to go into a room of people and watch that. Yeah.
No, I agree.
I
It's always
think
been
some-
interesting with
Oh,
like, oh, sorry. No, just
No,
it's
no,
always
no,
been
that's okay.
interesting when you like, even with just like my group of friends, if one of them isn't there, people may act differently versus if they are there. Like if person's that's not there is a very dominant personality, people almost try to like mimic it, or they're like, no, that's too much, and they like go inward. But you know, it's definitely interesting to watch that with people, especially if you like really know them too, because you're like, why are you acting that way? Because they're not here, but then they're here, and you're gonna act like that. So they like, okay, like yeah, it's interesting.
I think sometimes I really go into the why of we or me. My experience is just my experience, right? He talks about how we all see the world through our own eyes, and that's all we know. And I try to think about why would I take something personally? Why would that be my experience? And I think some of it has to do with how you're raised, but I think some of it is also society and what our norms are and how we're taught to exist from like the second you're born, right? Like the second you're born, your parents encourage you. Oh my gosh, look at you walking. Oh my gosh, you're having your first bite of food. You look to someone else to praise you. And then as you grow older, you go into school, you look to your teachers to tell you, where do I fall in terms of competency? You go from there to becoming part of a business or whatever, and you look towards your boss to tell you, am I good at my job? And our whole society is built for us to look outside of ourselves to tell us if we're meeting expectations or to judge us, so that then we can decide if we see that to be truth or not. And I think that's something that's like, if you really are going to try to get into these habits, you really have to break social norms. You have to literally just like blow it up, because it's taking everything you were taught from day one and telling yourself to unlearn it.
Exactly. Like,
You
and but
nailed it.
do you think about it, like it's that whole domestication thing, right? Like all the stuff we talked about last week or at the beginning of the book. But like I think about it even when you all were talking, like with my kids, like I'm always praising them. Like we do the same, like obviously I can only speak to myself, right? I do the same thing, but I'm a little more aware. So I do have the conversations at times of, how do you feel about it? How do you, like, you be you, that sort of thing. But my kids go to public school. So there's that, right? And there's, that whole thing. I mean, everything you just said is exactly it. And I just think about how can we, I mean, by having discussions like this, right? Like we're trying to break the norms. We're working on that by having these conversations, by reading these books, by doing this work. But I just see like so much more work, like just because I'm literally doing praising my children or vice versa, right? Like, I can't wait till they read this book themselves. But
No,
I think too
absolutely.
about like social emotional well-being, and like anxiety and depression is a huge part of our society now. And I think about myself in terms of my emotional journey and where I've been at different parts of my life and how it's been related to some of these thoughts in the agreements. And I remember, like, when I first started teaching, the anxiety I felt when I would have someone come in and evaluate me. Like, I remember describing it to somebody like there was some secret book I never got a chance to read. And I'm somebody who likes to be prepared for everything. Like, I study, I try to really think about things before I speak about them. And I was like, I felt like there was some kind of like secret book that I never got a chance to read, that whoever was coming into my class to judge me had some kind of recipe I didn't have access to. And it wasn't because they were harsh evaluators, but it was because I didn't know what they were looking for. Like, is what I'm going to present to you or show myself as in this space gonna meet what you believe I'm supposed to be? And then how is that then gonna make me feel about myself? And it hasn't been until like a decade later that I had to come to a place where I'm like, listen, I'm always going to receive criticism. That will help me grow, but it will not define me. I get to decide which opinions others place on me are my truths and which ones are their vision of what they see. And that's okay. Both are correct, right? We all have our own views and our own truths. And I will always acknowledge the other truth, but it doesn't have to become mine.
So who's coming to Alex's show someday when I put her on a stage and we just empower the world? Because I just can't with you. I love it. All of you. Like, no, this is all just, it's pure gold, guys. This is why we do this. I think that there is something to be said about all of that. Like, I think that your opinion of yourself is something that I want you guys to all think about that later. I want you to think about like how you view yourself. Because I know, like Alex, you said you have years under your belt of this kind of work. I can't say I have a decade. I guess, no, I'm going to say more like 5 years for me of really like looking inward. I've noticed a lot with my son lately. I don't know. I'm starting to try to ask him questions and like, are you proud of yourself? Like, I'm trying to like flip things around, and I'm hoping to start instilling that, like, how do we start that from a young age for them to look inward? That's definitely something I'm trying to think about as I'm teaching myself, because how do we get the future generations to not have to unravel so much and unlearn so much, and almost like give them a toolbox so that they're walking into the world equipped in some ways, because in all honesty, are they going to be swayed in directions? Of course they are, because exactly like you guys said, that's how we're raised. That's our society, and I think as like parents and just people in general, I think that that's kind of scary to think about. Like, there's only so much control we can have, but I don't know. Geraldine, sorry, did you want to say something? Or I think it's at the bottom.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. To your point, this agreement helped me check myself in the best way possible. Because how many times has everybody on this call been hungry or tired or got in traffic or for whatever reason took that out on somebody wildly, like you went bananas and you didn't mean to, and you're on an apology tour, and it never goes well. But when you stop to say to yourself, how many times have you done something that you wish that somebody wouldn't take personal because of your own insecurity or your own bad day? It helps you look at it differently. It really does. And it has you have some empathy on the other side when you're on the receiving end of that. And it also helps you brush it off a little easier when you realize that we're all human and we can all make that mistake. So that's why it's my absolute favorite, because the minute and I think, Colby, I think you said there's freedom in it. It's freedom. And it really kind of also ties back into the first agreement, to be impeccable with your word, because you don't have to have a response to somebody who's doing something that you're taking personal. Like, just let it go. It all ties in together, and it's so awesome when you get to that place.
No,
I think it also leans into that setting healthy boundaries piece too. Like, I feel like a lot of times I was taught to listen to the authority figure in the room. And, you know, it was mentioned like the dominant character in the room. Sometimes that, in my mind, naturally automatically becomes the authority figure. And me having to say to myself, and actually I've even said it out loud now at times, is like I hear that is how you feel, that is your experience, but that's not going to be mine. And being able to like physically say that without being like, oh, you're mad, so this is my fault. That has been a huge developmental leap for me as a person, because I feel like I was taught to think that if someone says, hey, you've messed up, I'm like, oh man. And then I look inward to fix myself. And then it becomes the absence of self-love. So it's like, oh, refocusing your brain to be like, which parts of this are mine and which parts of this are somebody else's. That's helped me, at least.
No, and I can totally relate to that, because before I left my job to become a stay-at-home mom, I worked in the busy insurance world, and it's a competitive position. You want to obviously keep your job, and you have to deal with specific accidents, and you want the higher accidents, but if you don't get those, it's because they don't appreciate what you do. And I can still remember my old supervisor saying to me about one person's work and comparing it to my work, when it's two totally different situations. And it, just looking at the notes, they weren't very different in the formatting, but they were, like I said, totally different accidents. So how can you compare that performance to my performance and, snap your fingers to her, but downgrade me and tell me that I need to go home and think about whether or not I'm in the right position? And then, a couple months later, I got the highest closing rates for the month, and she put it out there that I did such a fantastic job. It was a mind F for me, because you're telling me I shouldn't be in the job that I'm in for 7 years, and then you tell me that I'm fantastic and should keep up the good work. So I would come home every night, and I had like a little notebook next to my bed, and I was so engulfed in my mind from this job. But all I could think to myself was, it pays good. It keeps food on the table. It helps my husband. And, I'm expecting a child. And in that format, I just said to myself, I'm going to keep my little black book on the side, write my notes in it, write my thoughts in it every night to try and get them out of my head to get a good night's sleep. And then wake up the next day and just keep on keeping on. And once I got out of that field and I became a parent, saw how I take care of my children now, how I teach my children now, and reading this, it's like I battered myself for so many years. And it affected me that, and Chantel I've opened up to her for many, many years of how broken I am. And I've just, after the last 5 years of being a parent, almost 5 years, next week. Yeah, I'm finding myself completely, and I'm taking that and I'm instilling it in their minds that what people say, take it with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, it's you and your future and your success. What you want to do with it, it's not about making the millions of dollars. It's about finding the happiness in your future. Money, it's great, but happiness is where you find your life. And I always want them to know that. And it makes me feel sad because sometimes when my kids are eating breakfast, if I'm like, oh, good job, buddy, you know, to my son, and my daughter's like, well, I'm not done with my breakfast yet. Did I not do a good job? And I'm like, no, you're eating. That's the victory. You are eating. You're finishing your breakfast. Whether you're last, first, middle, end, I don't care. You're still doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what they need to be instilled is you're moving along, you're doing it, and that's all that matters. You're doing it for yourself, you're doing it at your pace, and that is all that matters.
Amen. I think there's this aspect too of like we need to get away from like comparisons. Like I think we really need to start pushing, and he talks about it in the book too. Sorry, you're fine. My husband's going through boxes. Thanks, babe. But we need to start really thinking about like, hold on one second, let me just answer him. It was downstairs. It's right on the bench, I think. We need to start really thinking about like ourselves as like we really actually are all in this little world. We all have separate little worlds, and like even our opinions are just our programming, you know, like, and I think that that's something while we're raising kids and for ourselves, like I have to like remember that myself. Like sometimes I love when he talked about this is like kind of like that selfishness that he talked about. And he basically was saying like sometimes like we go into situations trying to make like your opinions right. You know, like when you're going into conversations with people, you have this idea in your head of like, if you don't agree with what someone's saying, you're speaking to them as if you're trying to change their mind. You know, and I do it all the time. I'm going to completely put myself like out there right now. I am very opinionated, and I have found myself so many times not agreeing with someone and like trying to strategically like figure out how to make them see it my way. Does anyone do that? And I do it respectfully. Like, it's not like I'm like, you're wrong, I'm right. I do it subconscious. I mean, yeah, it's subconsciously. I don't even realize I'm doing it. Because we are all we're selfish beings. And I don't think necessarily that word selfish, I think always has a negative connotation. Story for another day. I don't always think it needs to have a negative connotation, but I think it needs to be addressed that we as humans tend to have like selfish, tendencies. Like I think that we have to understand that when we're projecting ourselves on the world and when other people are doing that as well, they are coming from a place where like they are in their own little like globe, and that their opinions are coming from the programming that they have. So I think also just learning how to have conversations with people without having that need to like project your energy on them, you know, or like your experiences and the way that you've learned things doesn't have to be the way that somebody is taking it. Like I loved the director of the movie thing he talked about. And he was like, we're all directors of our own movies, which is so true. Like you can basically so simply say like, we could all sit in a movie theater right now and watch the same exact movie, and we are all going to take drastically different messages. We're going to laugh at maybe different parts. We're going to cry maybe at different parts, because it's all going to touch us differently depending on our past programming. You know, like I know for me, like losing a pet or a parent, like I'm done. I'm a goner. You know, and I know like sometimes I'm watching things with my husband and I'm sobbing and he's like, you okay? Like I'm just an example. Like, and I think that that's life. Like I think all of us are watching life as if it is a movie, and we're the directors of the movie, you know? And I always like, I like that part. It was kind of towards like the end of that agreement, but did that like resonate with anybody at all? Like just that idea that we have to be also careful. I think it kind of goes back to Geraldine's like looking at us, like be careful of the way that you have conversations with people, because it's not always just about trying to make yourself and your opinions the correct ones.
Yeah. You're making me think. like I would say probably like the last 5 years or so, because I'm a lot older than you. So you know, it's been a while. No, I've really because I do so like I am a Reiki practitioner, right? A lot of people don't know what it is. It's not a tangible thing. So when I talk to people about this thing that's not tangible, it's there's a lot of conversation. There's just people that like don't believe, and so it's really opened me up for so probably I don't know, maybe like the last 6 or 7 years where I just am like, but really like the last few where I'm just like, I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm just speaking to my experience. So then I broaden that to like basically like the rest of life, right? Like this is my experience. Like I am not here to convince you of anything. Like I am not one to talk politics. I am not one to talk religion. Like, but I am very spiritual and I will have conversation. But and I could see myself thinking back to say maybe 10, 15 years ago when I would be trying to convince people of like basically my opinion is like the right opinion, right? And now it's like the more work like this kind of stuff that you do, right? And you get into things that are a little bit like less tangible or more philosophical, you know, that type of like heady space, right? Like, and you have more just life experience. You have kids, you don't want to like put your stuff on someone else. I've just noticed like really in the last however many years, less and less of that. Like I'm just like, I'm not here to convince you. Like you like me, you like me, you don't, that's okay. It's all energy. Sometimes I just like it's just your vibe. You might not have ever spoke and I just there's a wall. We're just not gonna jive, right? Like it's all energy. That's okay. It's all okay. I'm not here to convince anyone that they should come have a Reiki treatment or that you should believe that this is what it is. That, or like what I'm doing with my children is what you should be doing. Like, I'm not here for that anymore. You know, I have issues with my family. And I think a lot of it was just stuff I went through with my own family, right? Because again, you are, you know, like when I'm younger, I'm trying to do, you know, people pleasing and whatever. And like, I'm justifying what I'm doing in my life, right? To family members. And then I just had this moment where it's like, probably more than one moment, but where I'm just like, I don't care what you think. This is what is right for myself and my family, myself and my kids, right? I'm not here to convince you. I do not care. Like and I do care, but I don't care. Like it's like, you know, like but anyway, like I love that you just brought that up because yeah, it's I can just see as I age, as the more gray, you know, grows in, that it's less and less of trying to convince anybody that what I'm doing is right because it's right for me. And I'm just literally day to day taking the next right step for me. Right.
I think that's great. I think
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I will say that I think I luck out a little bit because my mom has always instilled in me like not everybody's gonna like you. You're gonna say something, it's gonna piss somebody off. Somebody else might be like, "Oh my God, she's right." Others might be like, At the end of, like you said, at the end of the day, you don't like me, you don't like me. I don't vibe with you, you know. The same thing, like you said, like sometimes you just like get like a feeling off of somebody, and you're like, we're not gonna vibe. Like I'll be civil to you, but we're not gonna be best friends. I'll be nice to you, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to make your day better. And definitely just like, yeah, oh, you don't like me? Okay, you don't have to like me. I have these people that do like me. It's
Kind
definitely
of liberating too, though, because I feel like when you do this, you actually become way more aligned, I think, with the right people. Because you're no
Yes.
longer shape shifting, right? You're not
Yeah,
like
you're being
changing
you,
yourself.
as
Exactly.
opposed to like, I'm gonna be this Justina with this person, this Justina with this person, this Justina with this person. And it's like, no, this is just me.
Mhm.
This is me. Very opinionated, very loud, don't care what people think. To, like you said, you care, but you don't care. It's not gonna be like the end of the world if they don't agree with you, but like, not everybody's gonna agree with me. I'm not gonna agree with everybody else. I can't let that ruin my day because there are people who do agree with me, do have like mindsets. And those are the people I want to be around. I want to be around the ones who are like, no, everything you said is wrong. Like, nobody wants that. You go be with other miserable people. I'll be with these cool ones over here.
No, I totally agree with that. And sometimes it's even like you could have known someone forever. You've always gotten along in specific ways, but as they stay the same and you grow, you slowly dwindle apart. And, it's sad because you have all those memories with them, but at the end of the day, they're not succeeding in any way further in their lives. They're just staying neutral. Whereas you are finding your new path, finding your new friends, finding your new, you know, life and trying
Growing.
to incorporate other people that aren't following that same path. And not everyone follows the same path. I don't mean that, but if they're not in the same direction as where you would be going to thrive,
Yeah.
then they're toxic because
Yeah.
they're not exceeding anything else. They're just staying kind of.
Yeah, they're just staying here while you're growing and evolving and learning and taking on new circumstances and new challenges and trying to overcome stuff. And then you have the ones that are just like, boop, nope, staying here. This is my comfort zone, not moving. And you do end up losing. I mean, I know some of my friends from high school, I'm not as close with some of them as I was, but then I still do have one who I'm extremely close with, similar mindset. She happens to live across the country, which kind of sucks, but yeah, she's one of those people you can not talk to her for months, and then when you do, it's like you never stop. And like those are the kind of people that I personally like want around me. Those people who just like jump right in. Like when Chantal reached out to me like that random Tuesday and she's like, "Hey, how's it going?" Like, you know, we were friendly in high school. I always thought she was nice. But we weren't like, we weren't biffles. We weren't like hanging out with each other, like braiding each other's hair or anything. But like, and then she reached out to me and she's actually been very helpful and supportive through the cluster of the fiance. And the movie, being the director of your own movie, that hit me because Chantal had said like, seeing this is like a preview of what your life could be like. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a movie I want. I'm I don't want to be in that movie. I don't want to direct that movie. But it's definitely true. You do want to be the director of your own life, but you also want to be like, don't want that kind of preview. That's on the cutting room floor.
Well, I think it's interesting too because right now it sounds like what you've gone through is recent. Is that true?
Yeah, it was like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So you're probably still
Yeah.
pretty raw on the
Yes.
feelings.
Yes, moving
So-
more towards the anger and like the what the F, but also like
Yeah.
I dodged a missile.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Literally
I,
like
and
3
I
weeks
hear
ago.
it. I hear it in your voice, and
Yeah.
I feel like I hold empathy for you because I've been in those not the same situation. We don't live each other's lives,
Yeah.
but similar challenges.
Yeah.
And my ultimate goal was to exist in a space of no resentment.
Yes. Yes.
And
So it's not
being
easy to do in that relationship with his mom and brother. They're very toxic people.
Yeah, but when you come, at least for me, when I've come to this place of like, with this not taking anything personally, I've gotten to a place where for me at this point, I can say like, oh wow, like if somebody treats me a certain way, at first it might sting, and then sometimes I have to coach myself. This is not a reflection of me.
Yeah.
This is their experience. And then I come to a place of empathy, like, dang, this is their suffering,
Yeah.
right? Like
What
their
caused them to do this is
yeah,
their trauma that
that's
they
right.
have.
Their experience of needing to have that continued suffering. And that's why sometimes I do use that phrasing, like, I respect that this is your experience, but that is not mine, and I'm not taking it with me.
Yeah.
And that really helps me draw a line, because for me, I've been identified as an empath at times in my life, and I literally have to physically be like, do not absorb the energy.
Yeah.
Because I don't want for it to become part of my experience. And I think that's something else that kind of helps, is reminding yourself that when somebody, as Miguel says, like, spits out poison,
Yeah.
it's a reflection of their own internal suffering. And at the end of the day, that's actually really sad. Like, and it's unfortunate that that's how they're existing. And then just being aware of that enough to be able to shift your own experience to reduce your suffering is when you can start getting to that place. It's like such a magical thing. Like, it's
Yeah.
so empowering. So at least that's, for me, those are some of the things I thought about when he was talking about the suffering piece and not taking things personally.
Yeah.
And
There was one part
and
he said-
drawing a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
nope,
like nope.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's one
Yeah.
part he said something like, when the person that doesn't treat you well walks away, it's a blessing, or it was something like that. I was like, yep. True story. Chantal had recommended this book to me a few weeks ago when all this happened, and then I missed the first one. I didn't have the book yet either. But then I got the book and I read the second one last night, and she was like, "Oh my God," she's like, "You need to read this. It resonates with me. It makes me think of you." And as I was reading it, I was like, "Holy crap. Has this guy been like right here? Like on my shoulder watching everything happening right now?" And yeah, just all very much hit home. Very much hit home.
No, that's perfect because I mean, like you said, it's what Miguel said in the book, but it's truly when you find yourself and you listen to yourself, you are choosing the peace and the happiness over the fear and the anger, and you're overcoming all of that negativity to get you to where you want to be.
Where you want your life.
Right.
And I love that you showed up tonight, because this is the perfect room for you right now. I think that you're surrounded by some really amazing women, honestly. And no, I'm happy that you came. And I just want to respect everyone's time. I know we went a little longer this time, but I think it was all great things, right? I will add, I kind of want to add this too. I feel like that part where we talk about this word, like fear, he talks a little bit about fear in this agreement. And I totally think it ties into what you guys were just saying too. Like, I think a lot of humans operate in this state of fear, like fear of being your authentic self, fear of not being accepted, fear of not even like knowing what to do with your life, right? And I think that part of our growth, like, first off, said it last week, I'm going to say it again, like, I love looking at screens on nights like tonight because, like, you're my people. And I think it's beautiful because we are all pushing for the growth. Like, we come here every week and we read this book 50 million times, or once. It only takes once to start, right? You're going to read it again, though. I promise it's not going to be the last time. And I think that people like us, like, we are, I think, true bravery, because I think it's much easier to stay in the comfort zones and to stay in that place of fear, which, Colby, I love when you were saying, like, sometimes we even lose relationships when we make these types of decisions, because a lot of people have a hard time watching other people grow. A lot of times, like, I've seen it in marriages when they fail. I've seen it a lot. Like, I've seen, it's just like, you have to just worry about you moving forward in life. And the goal is to align yourself with people that are moving forward with you. You know, and unfortunately, as you're moving forward, there are going to be some people that might even bring in some nastiness and toxicity because they are living in fear. Like they're afraid to grow. They're afraid to push their boundaries. They're afraid to reflect on themselves the way that we're doing, like on talks like this. Like not everybody is ready for this kind of space. This kind of space isn't comfortable. You know, like, and I think many of us live in a place where we're practicing this because it is, if you ask me, I think personal development is very much like a muscle. It's like walking into the gym for the first time and you go on the treadmill for 5 minutes, you think you're about to die. Like that's very, like personal development is ugly. It's hard because you not only have to like get those great feelings of motivation, you also have to face the ugly and you have to accept you're ugly because we all have ugly.
Yeah, you can't have beauty without the ugly. So,
No,
you can't have the bright, awesome moments without the dark moments. It's very much like yin and yang. You need the dark to have the light and appreciate it.
no, and we'll never like we'll never get to where we want to be unless we push that. Like we have to always be pushing that forward. But no, I guess I'm thankful for you guys. It's nice to align with people like this. And I mean, it's been on a weekly basis, which is really lucky, but just find your tribe. You know, it's really, I like to say that to people. In your tribe, you're going to have different pockets. I mean, I hope people have different pockets. It shouldn't be just in one place. Like I would hope that people have these little pockets, you know, and you can go to them for different purposes and different seasons of life. But I think that in Rise Strong Mamas, like my goal is to create the safe place, you know, and I want us all to have a place that we can go and just grow. Cause man, that shit gets uncomfortable sometimes. All right, I'm gonna stop recording. I'm here for another few minutes, so if you guys just want to hop, but hold on.